good morning, and how you doing? In Japanese. In Japanese. We're going to find out this morning a lack of a common language can be a problem. The Tower of Babel and then preparations for one nation. You found your outline? We have a test today, Nathan. Partway through, you got to flip it over. Okay, we're on it. Okay, the Tower of Babel. Some of you can find Genesis chapter 11, and then we're going to turn back a couple pages to where our story really starts. And they're really not stories, they're accurate accounts of historical events in the nation of Israel and our salvation as well. Okay, before we read Genesis 9:1, we'll open up in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for today. Thank you for the sunshine. Thank you for your Son, both S-O-N and S-U-N. Thank you for the salvation Jesus made possible through his resurrection from the dead we celebrated last week. We ask your blessing upon Pastor Mike as he's away and our speaker this morning, all that have a part in presenting your ministry here at our church. We thank you for every helping hand. Give us a good day together. Amen. Okay. We have one more chapter to look at today, chapter 11 in Genesis, and a couple other places we're going to go. And then next week we'll be in Proverbs, starting a study in Proverbs, okay? Okay, Genesis 9:1. Then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. What part of that command did the people at the Tower of Babel have? What part of that command? Fill the earth. They got as far as the plain of Shinar in present-day Iraq and put the brakes on. And God's going to give them a little adjustment we're going to see today. Okay, now back to chapter 11, a couple pages back. There we go. So we're going to look at the Tower of Babel account, which is also the building of the city around it, and then the preparation for one nation. So God blessed Noah and his sons and told them to fill the earth. I like those passages in the Bible that have maybe an indirect, but a reference to ourselves, because we're part of that as well. Okay, so last week we saw Genesis 10, the families of the nations, alrighty, and a lot of that occurred after what we see today happening in 11. But that account last week is going to come in handy as we reference a few places today. Okay, so let's look at these first verses here. Now the whole earth had one language and a common speech. As men moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly. They used bricks instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth. So in direct contradiction to God's command, they're going to park it right here for a while. This is probably 100 to 300 years after the flood, so some of them still might have been alive, a generation or two, and then this happens. And they're going to see that they're going to run into a problem when they start talking like, let us make a name for ourselves. Okay, we're going to do a little reflection on that. Let's go back to chapter 10. The population has started to move, so 10 picks up as far as they got after the Tower of Babel. Go to 10:5. Okay, from these the maritime people spread out into their territories by their clans within their nations, each with their own language. So after the Tower of Babel, new languages started to form. I looked that up, and a language can take 100 to 300 years to make happen. So how long did they have a problem not being able to speak to themselves? Not sure. But the people did group up, and they did spread out. Look at the last part of 18 in chapter 10. Later, the Canaanite clans scattered, and the borders of Canaan reached from Sidon towards Gerar as far as Gaza. Okay, so those people, that's probably Ham's, uh, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, the three sons of Noah. Ham's people settled into Canaan. Those are the bad boys of the three. Lots of bad things that happen along the way, and the Israelites are going to clean up that in a few hundred years. Okay, the last one is showing that they spread out a little bit. 32. Now these are the clans of Noah's sons according to their lines of descent from within their nations. From these, the nations spread out over all the earth after the flood. So that happens after we're talking about today, but it does record that they did start to populate the earth and fill, but that wasn't their plan, and God had to intervene. What other places in our recent history of looking at Genesis did God intervene in the few folks that were there at the time, and then more later? How did he intervene with Adam and Eve? Give them the boot. They didn't leave Italy, but they left, that part of Assyria probably today, down by where the Euphrates and Tigris dump into that place that's in a problem today in the Middle East. That's one. So they kicked them out of the Garden of Eden and put a flaming sword, an angel holding a flaming sword, so they wouldn't come back in and bite into the tree of life fruit. How about just before the flood? Just before the flood. We're going to look at those people's attitude. So he dealt with the first family, then he dealt with all of the population of the earth, and only spared a few. That's 8 people in the flood. Here, they're dealing with the whole population once again. God's going to intervene, as we're going to see in a few moments. And later on, God deals with Father Abraham. The first family, the chosen people, that's going to start to form in the last part of the chapter. So God redirects humans and ourselves as well. You ever have the God redirect you? Sometimes it's immediate, sometimes it takes a little while for us to wake up to what's going on. But that happens. God redirects people as need be. Okay, so full circle, I think it says in your outline, God redirects people. He judges, in this case, all humanity. All humanity. Okay, let's go on a little bit here. Back to chapter 10. Back to chapter 10, some additional background. Verse 8. Verse 8. See, it's hard to hear one turning of the page. See, that's what I'm waiting for. There'll be a few more turnings going on here. Cush was the father of Nimrod, who grew to be a mighty warrior on the earth. He, that's Nimrod, was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That is why it's said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord, quote unquote. The first centers of Nimrod's kingdom were Babylon. Okay, we're going to spend a lot of time with that. Erech, Akkad, we'll be back to that. That, by the way, was the first great civilization on the earth, the Akkadians. Okay, so Nimrod built that as well. And Calin in Shinar. From that land, he went to Assyria, where he built Nineveh, Reboth, Ir, Kalan, and Reston, which is between Nineveh and Calam. That is the great city. So Nimrod was very key to the dispersion of the peoples of the earth. Nimrod. Any guess to what that name means? He was a mighty hunter. He was a city builder, but he was something else. Anybody old enough to remember James Dean? 2 of you? No, besides me. What movie did he star in? Another one. Without a Cause. What's that first part? Rebel without a cause. Okay. Nimrod means rebel. He was like the leader of the pack here, sticking with that genre. And he said, we're going to build a city. We're going to defy God. We're going to stay here and make our name great. And we're going to see God's got other plans for Nimrod and the rest of them. Okay. So he was the founder of Babylon, and later that was called, first Babel and then Babylon. Go over to page 1036 in your Bible, if you got my version, or Isaiah 13:19. Isaiah 13:19. What did God have to say about people like Nimrod? Okay, almost there. 13 and 19. There we go. Babylon, the jewel of kingdoms. They thought very highly of themselves. The glory of the Babylonians' pride. Babylon had the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. All right? They will be overthrown by God like Sodom and Gomorrah. That's not what you want to be in the same sentence with, being cursed like Sodom and Gomorrah, where brimstone comes down from heaven and consumes everybody. So that's what God is going to do to the kings of Babylon later on because of their bad attitude. Okay. Where do we find ourselves in our history? Again, 300 years after the flood. This is thought to be 2200, 2600 before Christ. 2200, 2600 years before the Lord's birth. Noah is still alive. Shem's still alive. And we're going to see how that comes into play a little bit as well. And again, what are they going to do by having the city and the tower? What are they going to do? Make a name for themselves. And sometimes they did name the city after themselves. They were so prideful. They had affected themselves wrong ways mentally. The Bible says later in Psalms, what cometh before the downfall? Pride. Pride cometh before the downfall, and that's happening here as well. Certainly, man didn't think his project was going to take such a turn. Do you ever build something and then you stand back and look at it? Anybody but me do that? All right, we're looking into roof replacements. I'll be out there for like 3-4 years, hoping it doesn't leak, right? But again, we do that. We're happy to have a job done, but also we're a little bit of pride maybe. But these guys had big time problem. They didn't think though that their pride would turn into non-communication, babbling. We're going to take a look at those verses as well. Our writer here has interesting, what's that called, irony. They're going to try to build a tower up, and what's God going to do? He's going to come down. So let's take a look at that right here in verses. We left off at 5. We left off at 4, so let's go there. We left off where they're going to make a name for themselves, not be scattered over the whole face of the earth. Don't you love it when the Bible says but in a good way? But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the men were building. The Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Alrighty, come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other. So the Lord scattered them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth. From there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. We're going to pick that up in a second, but go to Psalms 2. I think that's mentioned in your outline, Psalms 2. Again, what does God have to say about people that have such inklings and direction and things they want to accomplish for themselves? Okay, Psalms chapter 2, we'll look at the whole passage here. Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? Certainly that's what the tower builders were doing, plotting in vain. The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers gather together against the Lord, against his anointed one. Let us break their chains, they say, and throw off their fetters. That's what these people are doing. We're not going to scatter. We're going to stick around and make a name for ourselves. The one, capital O, enthroned in heaven, laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. Then he rebukes them in his anger. And he did that here. He terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will proclaim the decree of the Lord. He said to me, you are my son. Today I have become your father. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will rule them with an iron scepter. You will dash them to pieces like pottery. Therefore, you kings, be wise. Be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you be destroyed in your way. For his wrath can flare up in a moment. Blessed, has a response and a reversal here. Blessed are all those that take refuge in him. So a very particular, very specific ways that God is going to judge people that don't have the right attitude. They're going to try to throw his approach away, and he's going to make an adjustment as we see here. How about that? How about that? Any reactions to these fine folks? Isn't that a nice thing? They wanted to come together, have a nice project, do something great. Unless it is in opposition to what God wants you to do. It might have been a good thing, but God laid down the law and confused them. I got a confusing thing here this morning. Something old. They used to have these put together the corner of a, one more time? Log cabin, sure. Yep, a barn, yep. And this was if, let's see, who do I pick on? Let's see, Nathan and another deacon got together. And I'm working on a job with them, right? And they asked me to go get one of these because they just ran out. And right then, before they said that, God intervened and confused us. So I don't show up with one of these. I come back with a left-handed smoke shifter. I don't have a clue what they just said, and because of that, they fire me. But guess what? I don't understand them, so I keep working. You see, everything falls apart when you don't have a common language to tie us together. With that common language, nothing will be impossible for mankind. Think about that. What could that include? If they could make this tower and not scatter and make a name for themselves, reach the heavens, what's next? Anything. They could conquer other gods. They could start, so, where do they think those other gods are? High up on a mountain, that's where the earthly plane deals with the sky plane, and perhaps God can be found. They wanted to worship the sun, the stars, the moon. I go out there with a skylight light on my phone, and find Saturn last night and look around. But that's a little bit different. But these people sacrificed to these gods that they thought they could see and could have an impact in their lives. But God says you need to worship the one true God, not false gods. So God is making a huge adjustment with these people. Nothing is inclusive. Let's go back to 6:5. That is prior to the flood in Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. How were these people's hearts prior to the judgment of the flood? Okay, 6:5. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every, that's sort of inclusive here, every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. Not some evil, sometime. It's all bad. It's all bad. So God judges them in the flood. Sounds like the folks also in the Tower of Babel had a heart issue as well. Let's do this together. Let's make a name for ourselves, and let's defy God. Not just in not scattering, but we're going to reach heaven ourselves. And when you think you can do that, you're not going to end up where you want to be. And that happens today. I had a neighbor that you say, well, I'm going to be good enough so God's going to send me to heaven. So I had him look in his Bible and read Romans 10, 9 through 13. It doesn't matter what we think about it, but what's the Bible say about it? And that's an interesting thing as we see here as well. Any other thoughts about the judgment that God gave to the Tower of Babel builders? Right. Exactly. Yeah. In about two paragraphs, I was going to come to that. But that's good. That's good. In spite of themselves, God is going to say, no, no, you need to populate the earth. You need to establish your own nations. I've said I was going to bless all nations, but now you're sticking together as one nation. So in spite of yourselves, I almost had a Three Stooges flashback. Spread out, you know. That's what he wanted them to do and accomplish their own destiny in the right way, not the way that they thought they would. So God's going to intervene, and I can't imagine how that would be. Sometimes, I don't know, I shouldn't ask for people to say, any trouble communicating with one of your friends? You just can't get your point across? But this is like a total reverser. I looked that up on God Answers. Okay, the confusion noted in verses 7 and 9 is God abruptly breaking their single shared language into multiple, mutually unintelligible languages. They no longer could cooperate or communicate. They were not able to understand each other instantly. They couldn't get their point across. They couldn't do anything. I don't know how far they got building the tower. There's various accounts on that. One we're going to see in the Ur of Chaldees was found about 300 feet tall. That's from like the base to the torch of Statue of Liberty. That's almost the same height, 300 foot. Okay, the Book of Jubilees, that's one reason we don't include those. They have sort of exaggerations there. They thought it was 1.4 miles tall. That's pretty tall. The engineers got involved. They do that sometimes, you know, and said bricks and tar, anything over 1.3 miles would collapse. It would just turn to dust. They're in a plain. They don't have mountains. They don't have stone. That's why they made bricks so they can make buildings. Okay? A lot of times they use stone. If they did, they maybe could have had a lot taller one. But if it was 300, 400, 600 feet, whatever, on a plain, that would be pretty outstanding. And I guess that's a play on words. But you could see it. Not so much around here. You know, we've got the tower up outside of Mount Gretna, the fire tower. That's only 66 foot tall. And you can see all the way around the 360 degrees. But 300 foot, 400 foot, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. So we don't know how big it was, but one that lasted to our time was 300 foot. They're square, and they go round and round. Excuse me, you don't go round and round with a square, do you? But anyways, up and up and up towards the heavens. Okay. Now, the other thought about that, that is up there. How long did it last? And who tore it down? Again, they built it partway maybe, or maybe all of it. What is better, you builders, to not be able to build something, or to build something and fall in love with it and say, aren't I great? If God would have stopped them before they ever started, people wouldn't say, look at that Tower of Babel. Look what happened to them. Look what happened to us, first of all, because of their pride. So I think God let them build it at least partway and left it there for a long time prior to, we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Alexander the Great. He got around, and he came into play here 323 years before Christ. So that Tower of Babel was up for a couple thousand years. That's amazing. Stood for a couple thousand years as an example to men's pride. Alexander says, let's tear it down, use those bricks again, and I'm going to come back and we're going to build something for me. What happens to Alexander in the meantime? Bites the dust. So God gets the last laugh again. So he takes this historical example of man's arrogance. He's going to take the bricks and build one for himself. And God, within 9 years, takes his life, and nothing is built of it. So God gets the last laugh once again. So when men's pride and arrogance come into play, it goes the wrong direction. Okay. Any questions about that? All right. Let's look at a couple examples of other problems people might have with their pride. Volunteer. Did somebody stick around with Isaiah? Remember where that was? We read Isaiah 14. Who'd like to read a couple verses in Isaiah 14? All right? All right. And then somebody go over to James 4. James 4. Somebody else. We'll spread it out a little bit today. Which one you got, Steve? You got James 4. Okay, we're doing Isaiah first. Isaiah 14, 12 to 15. Who's got that nice and loud? Isaiah 14, 12 to 15. You'll recognize this well-known passage. Who'd like to read that? Isaiah 14, 12 to 15. 12 to 15. Yep. How about it? Quite a reversal there. Who's the I guy? Satan. He's going to overthrow God, be like the Most High, and God judges he and a few angels, throws him out of heaven. James, or Steve, read James. Whoop. Is that chapter 4, 13 to 16? James 4. Yep, 4. I know we wouldn't be talking about fighting and discord in Sunday school. Okay, no. That's all right. Okay, so who should we check in when we make plans? Check with God. Perhaps we will go such and such place and make a little money and stick around for a while, but God says, you might not, but check with me and get in with my will, and we'll get along just fine. Thanks, Steve. Thanks as well. You got it. Okay, questions about that? So the approach, and the Bible is very specific. I will be like the Most High. I. They got not just eye problem, they got heart problem. Okay, and that shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen. Okay. All right, think about that word again. Nothing shall be impossible. Only one other place in the Bible, those two words come into place. Plan and impossible in Job. That's the only other place in the Bible that those two words happen in the same passage. It doesn't happen very often when God says your plans are going to be impossible, but he does that upon occasion. Okay, how about it? What did the building, sort of in summation here, the tower builders rather, they wanted to ignore God, defy God, and usurp God. But again, God had other plans and scatters them all over the place. So he, again, as was mentioned, their potential wasn't realized, and God had to scatter them. So they did accomplish what he wanted to as well. Okay. It didn't result in a heavenly directive, but a heavenly disgust. We're not going to let you do that. Ever heard the word Babel before? How many B's? This is B-A-B-E-L, okay, and the word that became part of our language, B-A-B-B-L-E, okay, that comes from the word confused, which is spelled B-A-L-A-L. So the word confused and Babel very, very close, and happens twice in our story. They thought this city meant, the name of the city was the City of the Gates of Heaven, and that would be B-A-B-I-L-I. So again, the narrator and the way the language comes through, very, very specific. Later on, some of these builders took their expertise and built the surrounding walls in Canaan. And what did the spies come back? The walls are too big. They're too thick. We can't overcome them. Okay, but God's got other plans, and he did wipe them out as well. So any culture that has that kind of approach is going to meet the same result as the builders of the Tower of Babel. Okay, take your outline if you would. Go down to those fill-in-the-blank parts. Put you to work. I'm going to read a little bit, and then I might say the word blank so I don't give the answer away if I pay attention here. Right away, number one. While their blank enabled ambitious project, I'm going to say unity. There's 5 or 6 ones that might fit there, but they're unity. We've got a common approach, a common language, a common goal. We're going to make it happen, and we're going to stick around. It was this very blank that ultimately brought about their dissolution. You can put what you want, but I put the word partnership. One language, one approach. We're going to make it happen. What they feared most, namely the loss of security and power by scattering, came to pass as a result of their own doing. Oh, this is a long one, number 2. Their architectural goal of reaching the heavens in verse 4 symbolizes their grasp for autonomous power, was frustrated by God who came down to earth. I think that's very humorous. They're trying to go up to heaven, and God comes down. It wasn't like, hey, brother, how you doing? It was, you're out of here, and other things. Okay, what appeared to be an unstoppable plan proved to be a dismal blank. Was it a success? A failure. There you go. I've had a couple of language problems in other countries. I was in Germany one time trying to order lunch. I thought Germany's close to French. But maybe I took 2 years, 50 years ago in high school. I ended up with raw potatoes and raw fish. Wasn't good. Costa Rica, trying to get our daughter a wooden pencil with a bird on top. You go to a wood shop, you think you could get your point across. What did I come back with? Nothing. I almost grabbed the gal's pen and started to do this, but I think I would get either thrown out or arrested. But so silly. Why can't you describe successfully, I want to buy a wooden pencil, so I raise my voice. No, that's what we usually do, right? That's not a good approach. But I gave up. Something very simple. Anyways, that happens. Anyways, I was like, I mentioned James Dean, another ancient reference. I thought I was Paul Newman in Cool Hand Luke. We had a failure to communicate. Cost him his life in that movie. Okay, number 3, back to topic here. Though they sought a name for themselves, they received the humiliating name of Babel, which equals B-A-B-L-E. Sometimes we think children are doing that when they speak, right? But they know what they mean. They know what they want, but we can't understand them sometimes. But we close that gap after a while. This word of Babel is all the more derisive when we recall the world's first empire, as we mentioned, for the colossal city Babylon meant gate of the gods. That's B-A-B-I-L-I. Number 4, their gods were perceived to live on mountains. Babel was Mesopotamians' attempt to make a name for himself, a man-made sacred mountain. Okay. A ziggurat, that's the name of them, Z-I-G-G-U-R-A-T, the assumed place where heaven and earth intersected. So they're trying to get up to heaven their own way, and God's got other plans. As mentioned, the largest ziggurat discovered was later just over 300 feet tall. No mountains, as we mentioned, so something like this would really stand out. Okay, let's pick it up down here. Man's attempt to bring God down to earth by trying to reach God, and Yahweh would have none of it. All right. God came down to heaven to judge him. And then lastly, number 5, it was this very onus of dispersal that enabled them to fulfill the divine dictate to, what were they supposed to do? 3 letters, or 3 words? Fill the earth. Fill the earth. Okay. How about that? Any questions about that? That's quite a story, but again, that's quite an account. How all of a sudden, just like Charlie Brown's teacher, wah, 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 wah. What does that mean? I don't know. But I can't imagine being in a place like that. I had been in other countries on business, and I was the only, I was tall in Japan, by the way. It was great. But I almost got on the wrong train, headed the wrong direction. I was the only guy in the train, didn't know that I had to switch on the platform. Try to read, you can't read those instructions, and there's nobody around to help you. I said, I guess I better leave, or I'm going back the way I come, I think. But anyways, I did make it back to the USA. Okay, all right, let's move on a little bit here. What does God envision? Fast forward 2,500 years. What's he envision in the future? One nation, serving him, all peoples, all tongues, all languages, and we're going to get into that a little bit. So I've been told the closing chapters or passages rather, of Genesis aren't in Genesis. They're actually in Acts. So we've been talking about scattered, scattered, scattered. When does the gathering begin? When does the gathering begin? Maybe Pentecost? All those nations that were named, and there was 10 or 11 of them, and you compare that to Genesis 10, only one of them is not included. All these real people are speaking real languages that they really haven't got the native ability to do so, but people are hearing about the praisings of God. Only Tarshish was added to the list where Saul was going to go. Interesting that those things line up, Genesis 10 and then Acts 2. Okay, we're going to go to back to Psalms, if you would, Psalms 47. Let's take a look at one of those. And a couple more are in your outline as well. All righty, 1 through 9 of 47. Clap your hands, all you nations. Shout to God with cries of joy. How awesome is the Lord Most High. Pastor Caleb, I think that's a good song maybe someday, okay? The great king over all the earth. He subdued nations under us, the people under our feet. He chose our inheritance for us, the pride of Jacob, whom he loved. God has ascended and amid shouts of joy in the name of the Lord, amid the sounding of trumpets. Sing praises to God, sing praises to our King, sing praises. For God is the King of all the earth. How about that? Repeat. For God is the King of all the earth. Sing to him a psalm of praise. God reigns over the nations. God is seated on his holy throne. The nobles of his nations assemble as the kings of his people. Abraham, they all belong to God. He is greatly, greatly exalted. How about it? So again, looking in the future, when we're all going to be together and all be able to shout, as it says in Revelation, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne. So someday we'll be back together. Again, before Pastor Mike gave me a few notes to bring together, hopefully, I hadn't considered that huge length of time between the scattering in the Tower of Babel to the gathering, and we're included in that, to the family of God. It was like, I took them at separate events, but the Bible, of course, one story, our salvation, over 4,000 some years. And here it is again for us. So let's talk about that second part of our lesson, unless you got other questions about the Tower of Babel. This doesn't take too long here. Let's go back to Genesis 11, and we're just going to skim down through here, not read these. You'll see a couple of interesting things in verse 10 and forward, going over to verse 26. So after the flood, I'm going to paraphrase here. Shem's 100. Again, one thing you'll notice is now the fathers are having kids earlier. They don't wait 500 years like Noah did. Okay. Shem lived 500 years after the flood. So 602 years total he lived. Okay. Again, we have somebody 35 years old and 12, having a child and 14, 30 years. Look at that name, Eber. Okay. He lived 34 years, became the father of Peleg. Eber, most scholars think, you add a couple letters before and after Eber, what do you end up with? Hebrew. So this is probably the beginning of the term Hebrew, one of Shem's descendants. Peleg was born, and back in verse 25 of chapter 10, I think, it says, in the time of Peleg, that was when the earth was divided. So probably that was when the Tower of Babel was occurred, and the dispersal happened. So Peleg was around that very generation when that occurred. Okay, there you go. Down to 20. Another guy, 32, 30 years old. Now we got a name we recognize in 24. Nahor lived 29 years. He became the father of Terah. And then after Terah in verse 26 had lived 70 years, he became the father of Abram. Okay, so now we find ourselves with Abram, later to be called Abraham. Okay, the first part of Abraham, the first two letters are, sounds like father, Abba, Abba, and then the rum, the other part, of many nations. So he was Abram for a while, then God gave his blessing on him, and he's going to become the father of many nations. So that's in verse 27. Let's read those. This is the account of Terah. Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran became the father of Lot. And while his father Terah was still alive, Haran died in Ur of the Chaldees, the land of his birth. That's where one of those ziggurats has been found today. 29. Abram and Nahor both married. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai. The name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. She was the daughter of Haran, the father of both Milcah and Ishkan. Now Sarah was barren. She had no children. Terah took his son Abraham, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram, and together they set out from Ur of the Chaldees to go to Canaan. But when they came to Harah, they settled there. Terah lived 205 years and died in Harah. So the grandfather is going to take the kids, head off towards Canaan. They got as far as, they got as far as Haran, and they sort of stopped. But God doesn't leave it there. He picks it up and tells Abram to go on to Canaan. Let's go to 12, 1 through 3. The Lord said to Abraham, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples of earth will be blessed through you." So how about that? So here we go. Abraham now. God is as he dealt with the first family, Adam and Eve, and he dealt with the first family after the flood. Now he's dealing with one of the first families after the Tower of Babel, and this is the start of the Jewish race, as it were. Later on, Abraham, Jacob, and Israel. Okay, that's where they're going to be. He changed his name to Israel, and they're going to have the 12 tribes, and all the people on earth are going to be blessed through them. How about that? So again, we're in there as well. U.S. backs Israel. We've been blessed as a nation. That's going to come. That's going to continue to happen for hopefully many, many years. So now we have from the first family to the first tribe, the first nation, the chosen man, Abraham, is going to be the father of the chosen nation of Israel. And almost all of the rest of the book of Genesis talks about that. Abram's travels going down to Egypt, his offspring got stuck there for 400 years. Moses calls him back. And then it ends with, I think, Joseph's bones being taken back from Egypt. So the rest of the book of Genesis deals with this first family that he has chosen. Okay, let's go in closing on your outline on the back side, some final thoughts, as it were. Okay, and if you want to check out one more reference I put down there, Genesis 26, 3-5, read. That's where the Abrahamic covenant is talked about, and a little more thoughts to ponder if you'd like. The first chapters of Genesis. Genesis 1 revealed the character of God and the nature of the world man finds himself in, a perfect place. Didn't take long to mess that up, unfortunately. Genesis 2 and 3 portrayed the relationship between man and woman and the effects man's disobedience has had on man-woman relationships and divine human relations. Genesis 5 sketched the long years that passed before the crisis of the great flood. That's 6 to 9. which almost destroyed all humanity for his sinfulness. That's again one of those but. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Genesis 10 started with the process of Israel's geographical and political self-definition with respect to other nations in the world. We just looked at 11, 1 through 9, remind us that all nations were in confusion and that all mankind's proudest achievements were but folly in God's sight and under his judgment. In 11:26, the scene has finally been set for the patriarchal history to unfold. How about that? That's where we find ourselves. Been a few good weeks in this great chapters. How about it? Any closing comments or questions? Again, we'll pick up next week in Proverbs. Okay. I'm going to dismiss you, but ask you, don't scatter too long. Don't make it a 2,500-year thing. All righty? I like it in the Bible when it says, that God's going to call his people, and to the Jew first and then the Gentile. So we get to be included as well in his plan. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And we have a special speaker this morning.